Hey, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a basic Xcode project. So we're going to download some movies from the Rotten Tomatoes API, which is going to let us play with Swift optionals for a bit, and then I'm going to show you the basic recipe for putting it into an unstyled table view. So first I'm going to create a new Xcode project. I'm just going to throw it onto my desktop, call it Rotten Tomatoes, and it'll be a Swift project, and for now I'm not going to install core data. So I'm first taken to this project settings page, and I have some stuff here that I don't really want. For example, I have this view controller, but I always delete this because it's kind of a non-semantic named view controller. So what I actually want is a new screen. So File, New, File. And for some reason, Xcode likes to put you in the OS X area sometimes. Make sure that you stay up in here in iOS. So I'm going to create a new Cocoa Touch class. And since this is going to display a list of movies, I'm just going to call it a movies view controller because I think that makes sense. And I'm going to make sure not to generate a zip file for right now. So I'm going to click next. And here I have my new file up here. Eventually I can organize this into groups here like this. So for example, I can create a new group called view controllers and tuck that into there. That's where all my screens will go. So I'm going to switch to my main storyboard, and for this exercise, I'm going to click on this tab right here, which is the document tab, and then I'm going to uncheck use auto layout. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to associate this screen here with this Swift file, this movies view controller. So I'm going to click on this yellow button right here, which represents the view controller, and then click on this thing that looks like kind of a driver's license to me. And driver's license tell you who you are. So who I am is, in fact, the movies view controller. Next, I'm going to drag a table view. So I'm going to go to this object area here and type in table view. I'm going to note that I'll never use the table view controller. So instead, I'm going to drag this table view inside of here. And then put a cell. So this cell is something called a prototype cell, in the sense that this cell is actually not here, but it's simply a cell that could potentially be here. So you can also think about it in terms of minting currency. So you might have a mint to create a new dollar bill, but it's not the actual dollar bill. So once I have this basic table view set up here, I'm going to create an outlet for the table view because I want to be able to control it. So go ahead and create an outlet to your table view here by control dragging. I'm going to call it table view. And after that, at this point, I'm done with the view design piece, so I'm not going to use the storyboard anymore. But before I move over to code only, I'm going to just double check what I have here. So I'm going to select the iPhone 5S simulator and go ahead and click play. So it's the unstyled table view that just has nothing in it for right now. So sure enough, hopefully, once this loads, I just have this empty table view. So I'm going to switch to just working with the code here because that's all I need. Now, before I configure the table view, let's get some data from the Rotten Tomatoes API just so that we have something to play with. So I'm going to open up Chrome here, and I notice that at this URL I have kind of a JSON response. And so if I were to compact this movies thing, I can see that it has 20 items, where the first item is this dictionary. So this dictionary itself is the movie. I can see the title here, Furious 7. So I'm going to copy this URL over here and move it into my file here. So in this view did load, which is kind of like document ready if you're coming from the web. In other words, the screen has loaded and you're free to configure it in whatever way you want. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to download the data from the Rotten Tomatoes API. So let's say that I do let URL equal to NS URL and then give it this string. So the NSURL object is a really dumb object in iOS. All it does is capture the address. It's just the canonical representation of this URL, just like me typing it into the Chrome address bar. So next, I'm going to specify a request, which is also a fairly dumb object in iOS. All it does is it takes that URL and it specifies what kind of caching parameters you want, what kind of post data you want to add to the request. So here's the first smart object, is the NSURL connection. This takes the two things above and it actually processes the request and takes care of handling the data asynchronously. So I'm going to pass in the request, and then I want to run this in the main thread. So we'll discuss this in another video, but for now I'm just going to say, hey, run this completion handler in the context of the main thread. And so here's a Swift closure. I'm going to hit the return key to auto-complete it. Now, unfortunately, so you see here I'm tabbing in this area with the parameters. I'm going to hit return to kind of auto-complete these. And unfortunately, for Swift, I have to manually name these variables to whatever I want to call them. So this doesn't come for free as part of the auto-completion. But these are the local variable names that I'll use inside this completion block. So at this point, I have the response from the URL. I can create a JSON object that will be the deserialized version of this binary data. So I'm going to pass in the data variable and then just pass in some nil options. In fact, for JSON serialization, you must always use nil for options and error here. So at this point, I have the JSON array. I can print that out, prove it to you by just printing this JSON right here. So if I were to run this, once the API returns, I can see in here in this console area that I have the same thing that was returned in Chrome. So now that I have this JSON object, I want to store it into some array. So I'm going to create an array here. Let's say it's called movies, and it's going to be of type NS dictionary, or an array of NX dictionary. I want to make this optional because these movies may or may not be there. So and actually I want this to be a var instead of a constant, because I'm going to need to change the movies later from when I return it from the API. So now in this block right here, let JSON, I'm going to, now that I have this dictionary here, so I'm going to option click on JSON, and I see that it's coming back as an optional any object. So that's not quite what I want, because I expect this to be a dictionary. So I'm going to cast it to be a NS dictionary. Now, if that JSON deserialization finished correctly, so I'm going to unpack this optional thing here. So in other words, if I were to click on this, option click on this, I see that it's potentially a dictionary, but it could be nil as well, because the JSON serialization could have failed. So I'm going to check to see if the JSON is actually there using this kind of weird incantation. So if let JSON equals JSON means that it's going to create an NS dictionary object called JSON. So if I option click on this JSON, I see it's not an optional anymore, it's an NS dictionary. And if this JSON is there, then I'll enter this if statement here. So I'm going to set my movies variable equal to JSON, the movies key, and I'm going to go ahead and cast this. I'm going to force cast this into an array of NS dictionary. So I'm taking a little bit of a chance here, because it's possible that, for example, this JSON dictionary doesn't have the key movie, but since in this case, I know for this API it always will be, I'll just shortcut and do this here. Now at this point, I have the movies into this variable. So I want to start the process of setting up my table view. Now the first thing that I need to do is I need to declare that my movies view controller can handle the table view data source and the table view delegate protocols. The data source is a thing that specifies the data of the table view, and the table view delegate is the thing that handles the events, such as clicking on a row or scrolling. So I see an error here, and that's because the table view data source has a few required methods that I have to implement. So if I control click on this, that allows me to navigate into the required protocols. And I see that there's two of them, this number of rows, and I can also see that there's this cell for row. So I'm going to go ahead and copy both of these functions and use control command left arrow to navigate back and paste these here. So these are the two required methods. And so in this case, I need to check the number of rows in the section. And so because my movies is a optional dictionary, I need to unwrap it. So if let movies equals movies, then it's non-nil. And so I can return the movies.count. Otherwise, I want to return 0. So this tells the table view, hey, how many rows do you have? Use of unresolved identifier ret. So just the compiler is just a little bit confused for a moment. So I'm just going to ignore it for a little bit. So I can see here that the Swift compiler recovered, and now this is fine here. Now for this table view, I'm going to come back to this storyboard and take a look at this cell. So I want to be able to grab or create new instances of this cell. So in this properties section here for the table view cell, I'm going to call this a movie cell. That way, when I refer to this identifier movie cell, it'll create a new instance of this. That's going to become more interesting when I start to put stuff into here to style it. So I'm going to create a new cell. And I'm going to ask the table view, hey, table view, can you grab me an instance, a reusable instance of something like that movie cell? And so if one exists, it'll hand it to me. Otherwise, it'll create a new one. And just go ahead and pass in the index path as well. The index path has the row and the section that I'm currently in. Now, if I option click on cell, I can see that it's going to be an any object. And I know that it happens to be a UI table view cell, so I'm going to cast it. And then I'm going to return this cell. So now that, so I'm going to use an exclamation point because I need to force it to cast there. So now that I have the cell ready for me, I'm going to create a variable for my movie. So I'm going to use this exclamation point here because the fact of the matter is, if this thing returns a non-zero count, then I must have movies. So I feel pretty comfortable doing a forced unwrap here. And I'm going to index it by the index path.row. And I cast this. Actually, if I option click on this movie, I can see that it's correctly a NS dictionary. So I'm going to grab the title out of the movie and just put it into the text label of the cell here. So equal to movie, and then if I were to consult my dictionary here, I can see that the dictionary is just title. So if I, oops, and of course I need to cast this again, so as string, because this comes back as an any object. So I see a blank table, although I see this came back with data. And the reason why is because these data source methods are run instantly. They're run as soon as the table is loaded. So there's nothing here that tells this table view, hey, something may have changed, run it again. So right here, at this point, I know my data has changed. So it says, you have to tell the table view, hey, table view, check your data source again, and that's what's going to cause it to call number of rows in section again. So at this point, once I get data back from the URL, I should see data here. However, I don't seem to see any data. And the reason why is because this is the other tricky thing that's easy to forget, is that the table view actually wasn't specified to have a data source. So the table view needs to have a data source. In that case, I want that data source to be me. So table view.delegate to capture all the events, and the table view.data source. So if I were to run this again, finally I see a table view that just has the titles of the movies. Now, even though this looks really boring and unstyled, actually it only looks so boring because in our storyboard, that's all we have. We just have the default cell. Now, of course, I can expand this cell and start to throw in other view elements into here, but that'll be the topic for another video. Now, the final thing I want to address is this wording right here. So what it's just saying is that because I'm forcing the downcast here, self.movies can actually never be nil. So what it's maybe encouraging you to do is put a question mark right here, which means try to cast this if you can, but if you can't, then that's okay. Self.movies will just be equal to nil. So that's it for the basic setup. So hopefully it was fun to play with a little bit of the craziness of optionals and to see that basic recipe for creating a table view.